All right, guys, we are going to continue talking about trigonometry. And just to do a little bit of review before we get started, we're using this reteaching sheet today. And I just wanted to touch base with you a little bit about the trig functions and just make sure that you understand those ratios. So again, we said our mnemonic that we use for this is SOHCAHTOA. So SOHCAHTOA, SOHCAHTOA. Okay, and again, each one of these, we can kind of think about the fact that these are kind of separated into groups of three groups of three. And so right here kind of gives you that ratio that each one of those represent. So sine equals opposite over hypotenuse, which is SOH. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is CAH. And then tangent is opposite over adjacent. So again, if we're just looking at ratios, let's go ahead and label these as the lowercase letter of the angle that they're across from. So you notice here's angle A. Across from that right here, we can call that side A. And then across from C, we typically call that the hypotenuse anyway. And then across from B, big B, we're going to call that little b, okay? So if we're talking about sine of A, again, our angle that we're really focusing on is here. So sine is opposite over hypotenuse. So opposite over hypotenuse would be A over C, okay? You can see that right there. Now let's talk about cosine of A. So again, I'm looking at angle A. Cosine is adjacent. So remember that it's the leg that is attached to that angle. So adjacent would be here. And again, hypotenuse would be right here. So our ratio would be B over C. So last but certainly not least, we're talking about tangent. And we'll get the red color, I guess. So when I'm talking about tangent of A, here's my angle A. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. So I'm going to do opposite over adjacent. Notice that hypotenuse is not used in this one. So if I make that a ratio, I'm going to have opposite, which is A, over adjacent, which is B. Okay? So you've got to understand that part right there in order to really be able to use this to your advantage when it comes to finding sides. And you're going to see kind of what we're talking about right now. So I'm going to go ahead and scroll down here, and we're going to look at number one. As a matter of fact, I may try to make this a little bit bigger so that we can focus on one problem at a time. Oh, that is nice. All right, one more time. Why not? Okay, so it says find the value of t to the nearest tenth. Okay, so we're looking for the value of t. Well, you notice t is right here, okay? Now, the only other information that we're given is we're given this side length right here, and we're given this particular angle right here, which is 44. So what I want you to think about is when you're trying to solve these problems, you're always kind of focusing on the angle, okay? The angle is the first place that you're trying to look because this is what's going to tell you what trig function you're going to use, okay? So now let's think about our side lengths that we're given in relation to this angle. Well, you notice we have a t right here. Well, what is that t? Is it opposite, adjacent, or is it the hypotenuse? Well, first of all, we can decide that it's not the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse is always the side across from the right angle. So actually, I'm going to go ahead and just label this my hypotenuse. Okay, I know that that has to be my hypotenuse. So this one either has to be adjacent or it has to be opposite. Well, again, if you notice, this side t shares this side length here with the angle. And so we can confidently say that that is adjacent. So now the question really is, what trig function do I need to use in order to solve this problem? Well, again, I go back to SOHCAHTOA. And I'm asking myself, well, I've got adjacent and I've got hypotenuse. What trig function has adjacent and hypotenuse in it? Well, the only trig function that has adjacent and hypotenuse in it is cosine. So that tells me that that is the trig function I need to use in order to try to solve this problem. So here's the way we work this out. We're going to do cosine of 44 degrees. The degrees always goes with my trig function, okay? And that equals, remember this is a ratio. So again, cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. So that means my adjacent side is going to go up here. Well, my adjacent side just happens to be t. I don't really know what it is right now. And 22 is my hypotenuse, so it's going to go right there. So the question now really becomes, how am I going to solve this particular problem? How am I going to work this out? Well, this comes back to equations, right? I need to get this t by itself. Right now, I'm taking t and I'm dividing it by 22. So the opposite of division is actually multiplication. So I'm going to multiply this side by 22. But if I multiply this side by 22, I'm also going to have to multiply this side by 22. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and put my 22 right there. I know I'm kind of squeezing myself in for room. But now this is what I have left, okay? So my 22s here cancel. And now I'm just going to rewrite this. Again, I can rewrite it the opposite way. So t equals 22 cosine 44 degrees, okay? So now's when the calculator really comes into play, all right? So I'm going to go ahead and bring up our Desmos calculator. So again, hopefully you've already got a link on your device for this. And you don't really have to use the graphing calculator. You can also use the scientific calculator. Really, all of these do exactly the same thing. So it doesn't really matter as far as that goes. So I'm going to go ahead and, again, where in the world would this be? Well, first of all, I know I'm starting with 22, right? So I'm going to go ahead and put 22. But now I need to find cosine. It's got to be here somewhere, right? I'm going to move this out of our way just so we don't have that in our way. And it's got to be here somewhere. So if I look at functions, notice what I find. I find this menu here. And you notice I've got all these trig functions down here. Now, you don't need to worry about these just yet. When we get to Algebra 2, we'll talk about these, okay? So I'm just trying to confuse you now. Sine, cosine, and tangent are the ones that we know, right? And we know in this case we need to use cosine. So I'm going to go ahead and put cosine right there. And notice it's already given me some parentheses and it's wanting me to put something in there. Or you remember we said that the 44 needs to go right there, okay? Now notice it's already trying to give me an answer. Now here's the part that's really critical. If you're using Desmos, if you're using TA Inspire in person, then I'm going to show you how to use that as well. But if you're working here within Desmos, what you need to remember whenever you're doing trig functions is you actually need to go up here to this little wrench and then you need to change this 2 degrees, okay? Because this calculator does not understand that you're trying to work with degrees. And so if you'll notice, it went ahead and it gave me an answer, okay? It gave me an answer here. So I see that my answer is 15.825. Again, it said that I needed to round my answers to the nearest tenth. So my answer for this particular problem would be 15.8, okay? So t equals 15.8. So kind of get an idea there of how this works out. Let's work another problem, and maybe this will make a little more sense. So we'll go through this again. And here we're given this problem. Okay, again, what we're trying to find is t. And I am given this side here, and I'm given this angle right here. Okay, so again, my focus, I said this before, but I'll say it again, is always on our angle first. So then we're looking at this particular problem and we're saying, okay, what is t in relation to 46? Is it opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Well, we know it's not the hypotenuse because look here. You will note that I don't have the hypotenuse. I don't know what it is right now, okay? So I'm not really even looking for that. So the hypotenuse is not part of my equation. So let's think about this again. Which one of my trig functions, let's go back over here to where we had them written, which one of my trig functions doesn't have hypotenuse? Well, cosine has hypotenuse, sine has hypotenuse, but you notice tangent does not have hypotenuse. So that tells me right away, if I'm not given a hypotenuse as a side, then it has to be tangent that I'm going to be using. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and write that, tangent. And I know that my degrees is going to be 46 degrees because that always goes with my trig function. It's always connected. Okay, now I know that tangent is opposite over adjacent. So let's think about this. What side is opposite this 46? Well, you notice my angle's right here, so the side opposite that angle is, in fact, T once again. So my T goes right here, okay? Now let's think about, okay, what about the bottom here? What am I going to do? Well, that's adjacent, right? So this side is adjacent. So it would go right here, 10.5. Now, again, we've got a similar situation that we had last time in that we have our T on top, okay, and we have 10.5 on the bottom. So I'm dividing by 10.5 right now. The inverse of that would be to multiply by 10.5. Well, if I multiply this side by 10.5, I'm going to have to multiply this side by 10.5 as well, okay? Which means I end up with T equals 10.5 tangent 46 degrees. And I can really easily go over to Desmos. Again, make sure that this is in degree mode, okay? As long as it's in degree mode, then I can go here and I can go ahead and type my problem. I don't know why this thing just keeps putting this up here. We'll just keep working with it. So I have 10.5 tangent of 46 degrees. And because I already have my calculator in degrees mode, then I know that this is the correct answer. Again, this 7 would tell this 8 to go up. So if I'm rounding to the nearest tenth, my answer is going to be 10.9. 10.9. All right, let's look at one more. I want to try to get one that maybe has a little bit different scenario with it. So in this one, I'm only given one side and I'm given an angle and I'm asked to try to find the other side, okay? So what I'm going to try to do is let's try to find this side right here. We'll call it little t just because it's across from big angle T, okay? So think about what trig function we would use in order to be able to do this. Again, it's always going to be different depending on what you're given and what you're looking for, okay? So we always look at our angle first. Here's my angle that I'm using to try to figure things out. And we're going to ask ourselves, okay, what side is opposite? Is this opposite, adjacent, or hypotenuse? Well, it is definitely the side that is opposite. So we'll go ahead and label it as opposite. And then if this is T that I'm looking for, then this is actually adjacent. Okay, it's not the hypotenuse because the hypotenuse would be the longest side and it would be here, right? So this has to be adjacent. So I know then if I'm using an opposite and adjacent is why you've got to remember, get these trig functions kind of in your head as to what is what. Again, I'm going to go over them one more time. Sine equals opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is opposite over adjacent. So you can see that I have opposite and adjacent, which means I need to use tangent. So it's why it is so important to make sure you try to remember these right here. All right, so now let's set this up here. I've got tangent, so I know that's what I need to use. My 50 degrees goes with this. And I've got opposite over adjacent, right? So opposite is 10, and adjacent is T. Notice what happens here. I've got a little bit different scenario. A while ago, I had my T up on top. Let me show you that problem again real quick just so you see. I had my T up here on top and my number was on bottom. This time, my variable is actually on the bottom. So again, this time I'm dividing by T. Well, in order to get rid of that T then, watch what happens here. I need to multiply by T, which means I'd multiply by T over here. The problem is this cancels out, but I still have a T with something else, which means I've got this tangent of 50 degrees that's being multiplied times T, but I still don't have t by itself. So what am I going to have to do in order to do that? Well, I'm going to have to divide out tangent of 50 in order to try to get it over here. So if you notice, what I end up with is t equals 10 over tangent of 50 degrees. So I've got a little bit different problem that I need to put into Desmos this time, okay? What I want you to notice is, again, we started with this as our problem. Tangent of 50 degrees equals 10 over t. And I ended up with this as the problem I need to solve. What's the difference between this and that? Really, all we did, if you notice, is we just switched these two out. Okay, that's really all we did. So when you have a variable at the bottom, literally you can just rewrite your problem by switching these two values out. Okay, but again, this is the problem I want to try to solve right here. And so I'm going to go ahead and go to my Desmos calculator. And this time I have 10 divided by tangent of 50 degrees. And notice what it gives me. It gives me 8.39, which the 9 is going to tell the 3 to go up as far as rounding goes. So my answer here would be t equals 8.4. Okay? So again, hopefully this has been helpful. Your practice is exactly like this. So you only have 10 questions. But again, you're going to be using whatever trig function you need to use to solve these problems. So it may be sine, it may be cosine, it may be tangent, just depending on what your situation is. Okay, so just 10 problems. Obviously, if you need any help, make sure that you get with us, and we will be glad to help you with this.